Grooming occurs between an athlete and someone of authority that they deeply trust, that they have been under the guise and influence of and led to believe in. It's a culture of isolation and brainwashing. Welcome to We Ride Together. My name is Catherine McLean. I'm the Program and Partnerships Director. Today, I'm joined by Michaela Shepard, our Executive Director, and Madison Smith, our Communications Manager. And we're going to have a down-to-earth conversation about our educational content and materials that we provide.
Hi, I'm Madison Smith. I'm the Communications Manager for We Ride Together. I'm an equestrian, a climber, and a survivor of sexual assault. And what we've learned at We Ride from speaking with so many athletes and coaches and parents, federations, and other stakeholders in athletic communities is really what the pillars of our mission need to be: our education and awareness, and the importance of making those things tangible, relatable, and actionable so that we can make sure we're keeping our sports safe and healthy.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Kat. And Madison, I think your points are so important. So like Kat said at the beginning, my name is Michaela Shepard and I'm the ED of We Ride Together. And, I think something that we can't reiterate enough times are the statistics related to sexual misconduct in sport. So we know that 50% of athletes are going to experience some type of sexual misconduct before they're 18 years old. So again, that's literally just a flip of a coin. And so when we think about these statistics, we know how prevalent of an issue this is. And so I think it's really important, Madison, what you said is like We Ride Together, we really focus on that proactive prevention as it relates to awareness and education, providing resources and materials to all of these different types of athletic communities. So when we think about how we specifically as We Ride Together can do that, I think it's important that we continuously are able to contextualize these conversations for every type of sport and at every type of level.
Yeah, and so I think, let's dive right in. And we were founded in the sport of equestrian, but we talk to athletes across all sports and across all ages. And no matter if we're writing on our blog or talking in person or having one-on-one conversations, the first thing that we educate about is those power imbalances. And so similar to a teacher-student relationship or employer-employee relationship, there's a power imbalance at play between coaches and athletes or any athletic authority figure. So that could be a physical therapist, a staff doctor, a groom, etc. And so when that power imbalance is at play, it's not inherently bad. There's nothing wrong with it. We actually need the skills and the expertise from our coaches or that person of authority to help us develop in our sport and grow and learn and that kind of thing. It can be a beautiful relationship. But when not monitored or mindful, that relationship can go from one of care and respect to one of power and control. And that's where it can be unhealthy. And so this is what we start our conversations with.
So I think before we dive in, it would be really helpful. Can you give some examples of like what a power imbalance might actually look like in the context of athletics?
Yeah, definitely. So say Madison was the athlete on my team and I'm her coach. I could have that authority to bar Madison from competing at the next tournament or from getting on the varsity team or riding a certain horse. And so in that dynamic, Madison is under my authority and under my power in that sense. And therefore, she can provide me with true consent because she's under duress. And if she doesn't feel like there's a choice in that relationship because I have that authority or power over her, she doesn't have her full free will.
Thank you so much. I think that's so important to have that just basic understanding, because I think what we hear a lot in this space are conversations as it relates to the age of consent, right? I think what we hear a lot from, whether it's a coach, even other athletes, parents, organizations is, this athlete's of age. So, right, there couldn't be a power imbalance. But I think, it's really important that we have these conversations to highlight that you really can't give that consent when that power imbalance exists.
You're right. No matter what the age, it's not appropriate under any circumstance for a coach and athlete to have a sexual relationship because that power imbalance is truly at play.
So in those scenarios, how do we safeguard ourselves, our friends, our teammates, and our communities? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it goes all back to prevention. Do you want to kind of break down our pledge? I feel like that makes it really tangible.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for us, what we've learned from having all of these different conversations from, different organizations, different sports, coaches, parents, athletes, people need actionable steps. They need something tangible. So for us, one of the resources that we created is our Coach Athlete Pledge. And so these are 10 best practices that can be implemented onto any team, no matter what your level, no matter what your sport. And these best practices, they work to empower athletes and parents and coaches to all be playing from the same playbook, right? Because it gives everyone the same language to be working from. So if something does happen or if a boundary does start to get blurred, then again, you can refer to these best practices and think, hey, this doesn't feel quite right. Let's correct this behavior before, it goes too far, before there is actually an incident of some type of abuse or some type of misconduct. So for us, that's a really great starting point that we highly encourage all of our teams, all of our different sports to really consider implementing, because again, it goes back to it being simple, tangible, and really positive, proactive language.
Michaela, how can people implement that pledge?
That's a really good question. So what we do, we really encourage our coaches to use it as an onboarding document, right? So just how, a parent or an athlete might sign a liability waiver when they're starting a sport or joining a new team. This is something that you would put in front of an athlete and a parent, so that everyone is playing from that same playbook. They all have the same language. Again, it just makes it so that as soon as you are a part of a team, the culture is established and these best practices are front and center in everyone's mind.
And when you talk about those best practices, what kind of reactions do you get?
It's really interesting. I think it's a mixed bag, right? Because sometimes people don't understand why it's necessary to have these best practices, but what we constantly are reiterating and emphasizing when we have these conversations with athletes, parents, coaches, is that these are best practices. And we're here to help empower not only our athletes, but our coaches, right? And so if our coaches feel like they're empowered, and that they have this education, that they have resources that they can lean on, then ultimately everyone is going to have a better experience in sport. Sport is going to be healthier, it's going to be more fun, it's going to be safe, because again, it provides that backbone in terms of what's expected, what behavior is expected on our team, and what behavior is not acceptable.
Yeah, and I'm going to just granulate. We're talking kind of vaguely about our Coach Athlete Pledge, which is 10 steps to make your sporting environment safer and healthier. And items on this list are creating transparent and accountable interactions and behaviors and communication. So this can be with an online text chain, having a parent or someone else involved in there, no direct communication between a coach and an athlete. Or if there's a certain area in your practice facility, having that open and accessible. So nothing is happening behind closed doors, i.e. following the window rule or the rule of three, where this interaction can be observable. And I think these preventative practices, they're really simple and relatively easy to implement across all sports, but they're really effective because they help prevent against grooming. And we're not talking about grooming a horse or your personal grooming, but we're talking about the progression of sexual abuse and an insidious relationship that can occur from this power imbalance. And so these pledge practices really complement grooming prevention in that they reduce isolation, they reduce secrecy, they reduce favoritism, which are the pillars of grooming that we're trying to prevent.
I think before we go further too, Kat, would you mind kind of talking a little bit more about the nuances of grooming? Because you talked a little bit just now about athletes, but how can that help support parents and other staff members even who fall victim to grooming?
I'm really glad we're talking about this. Grooming is something that I think is the biggest point that we need to talk about and drive home, and that is so under talked about or under identified. And it can be really hard to pinpoint until it's too late. And so what is grooming? It's insidious. It's difficult. It's traumatizing in the sense that grooming occurs between an athlete and someone of authority that they deeply trust, that they have been under the guise and influence of and led to believe in. It's a culture of isolation and brainwashing, if you will, in which parents are also under the scope as well, and maybe even other staff members, that the perpetrator doing the grooming is often extremely charismatic or uses their manipulation and their threats and their domination to slowly chip away at one's trust and development. And so things start really gradual. It could be playing favorites or engendering that trust. And then later on, it's escalated into touch or even sexual abuse. And sometimes you don't realize it until it's too late or it's already been happening for a long time. One more thing that I'll add too, part of the big pattern of grooming is that these behaviors have become so ritualized and normalized. And so these gradual little things such as gymnastics, athletes being lined up and manually adjusted by coaches, it starts out just maybe on the lower back, but then is in more of an invasive or not appropriate area. But people have seen this over and over and over again, that it becomes so commonplace that people are like, well, that is fine. We've been doing that for forever. Or that's just standard practice, but it's not. And this is where we're waking up and creating new norms of best practices and ways to have ethical behavior that everyone is actually truly safe and comfortable and appropriate.
So I'm curious if you can almost break that down more. Like if I am someone on a team, like what are some red flags that I might, see as an observer? And then I'm curious too, like how does like the coach athlete pledge tie into preventing these things from happening? Because like you said, it is so insidious.
Yeah, so this is where I would actually direct to another resource that we have on our website. It's called the Coach Athlete Relationship Dynamic Wheels. And they provide a stark contrast of healthy to unhealthy relationships and talk about respect and trust versus such things of verbal abuse and manipulation and that kind of thing. So the hallmarks of that grooming relationship are more of a degradation, if you will, of things going on. And so there's secrecy, there's favoritism, there's intimidation, there's threats like, you can't tell anyone that this is happening. If you do this, you won't move up to the next team, or this is normal. No, this is okay. I do this with every athlete. It's not that big of a deal. So minimizing the experience that they might be having. And these young athletes, especially, or even young adult athletes, are so engaged and are so desired to proceed in their sport that they think, I have to stay with this coach. This is how it is. This is the way I get better. And they're under this belief and this limited perspective and kind of siloed way of seeing and thinking that this is how it is. And parents often too think that their coach is on a pedestal and that no way this could be happening to my kid or in my kid's sport. And so the pledge, going back to that, provides that code of conduct that we can all stand behind so that these behaviors are less likely to happen. They're preventative in that sense. But the only one who's responsible for the perpetrating is the perpetrator themselves. The victim is never to blame, and neither are the parents. So until there's that cultural shift at large where people are behaving more ethically and responsibly, we all have a role to play in keeping our sports safe. And this comes down to empowering, like you said, athletes and parents and coaches with such tools. And so I'll kind of break these down into sections and talk to me throughout. But let's start with athlete tools. And so how can we empower kids and young adults and adult athletes of all ages? How do I know if this relationship is healthy? How do I know if grooming is occurring? What do I do if such thing is going on? And so what we love to talk about and teach, and my favorite thing to talk about, is developing your intuition. And so this is strengthening that gut instinct inside of you, whether if it's a chill that you get or butterflies in your stomach. You know when something isn't okay or it is okay. And it's developing that trust with yourself and that power to recognize, every time I'm around that person, I feel super unsafe. Or, wow, that environment feels really great and I'm comfortable and able to thrive. My shoulders relax and that kind of thing. But the more we tell our athletes how to listen to their own intuition, they can be empowered and recognize, hey, maybe that coach isn't the right person for me to be around. And that can be a cue to them that maybe this environment isn't okay or that something's not right.
I think that's such a good point. And this can be a tool for athletes of all ages, because Kat, that just, that made me think about different educational presentations we do with kids, who are, 12 years old, and they're able to identify, hey, like, when I'm thinking about this and being around this person who makes me uncomfortable, like my stomach hurts or I feel nauseous, or, maybe I get a little bit sweaty or shaky. And it's unique and different for each athlete, but being able to hone in and identify it and put words to it, especially like in certain circumstances, I think is really, really powerful.
Yeah, because these body cues could be indicative of a physical illness or something else going on, or you're nervous before a test or something like that. But our body is designed for survival, and these instincts are the source of our greatest knowledge. And so the more we can align with our physical bodies as a cue and listen to each other when we say that. So if Madison came up to me and said, hey, I just feel really icky around this person. I'm going to believe her and trust that because that's honoring each other's knowing. And so I think this also helps us learn when to say no and speak up to set those boundaries of when a situation isn't always appropriate. So, on top of developing your intuition, another athlete tool that I love teaching is similar to how we know if there's a fire. We all have a plan in our mind. It's stop, drop, and roll, call 911, get a fire extinguisher. We kind of know those basic things that we're going to do when a fire happens. We also can visualize in our mind if something unhealthy or negative were to occur in our sporting community, what are our action steps of what we're going to do? Because in the moment of something toxic happening, your brain freezes. You might have a trauma response or not be able to function at your higher level or be really confused. So ahead of time, if I already know a plan of action, that's going to help me in that moment. And so what is in my plan of action? It's going to be developing my intuition and listening to my body signs, but it's also going to be having that one safe person that I can go to talk to. So outside of an emergency or that situation, I already know one person on this planet that I can trust and that I can go to about anything. So that if something inappropriate does come up or I'm confused by, or if I don't know if it's quite right, I know who I'm going to go talk to in that moment. And that saves me trouble in that exact issue and circumstance that I already know what I'm going to do. So I love having that tool in your toolkit because it's free. You can access it anywhere and it's something empowered that no one can take away from you.
Kat, that conversation about boundaries, I think is so important, right? Because athletes, they spend so much time with their teammates or with their coaches. And so these boundaries between personal and professional can get blurred. So having that discussion, that action plan, like you said, it can be really, really important just in that frame of mind of how can we be proactive in our prevention and really instilling best practices. And so it also kind of got me thinking too, if I was a teammate or maybe I'm a parent and I maybe see a boundary getting crossed, like what are some other things that we can do? Like what can you dive into another resource?
Yeah, and I think that perfectly rounds out the toolkit. And this applies to teammates and to parents and to coaches is how to be an active bystander. And not just a bystander, not just recognizing that something fishy is going on or abuse is occurring, but how to actively stand up to that and make a difference in the moment. And this doesn't always have to be direct. Sometimes it's not safe to do so, or given your position or identity in that certain situation, you aren't empowered to do such thing. But perhaps you can make an indirect example of something going on. And so I could drop a bucket of balls or spill a water bucket to create a diversion if I saw my friend being victimized by a perpetrator in that moment. Or I could call out the behavior directly if I was in a position to do so. If there was hazing going on in the locker room and I'm a senior on that team, I could call that out and say, hey, that's not what we do here. Like we have a code of conduct and that behavior is not cool. Let's do something else. And so we have a bunch of strategies online that really break this down via different scenarios that can help people give specific language and tools about how to handle these difficult situations. And they're truly all nuanced and no textbook or no therapist or no parent can give you that exact language for in the moment because it's all super unique, but they are pillars and principles of what we can do in these dynamics to help make a difference and to help change the culture and the tone.
So I think that kind of transitions us into like that next step of, if I did see something happen or, if I have a teammate who does come up to me and disclose that something happens, what do I do? How do I support somebody who has had an experience with some type of abuse or misconduct?
Yeah, that survivor support. This is a question that we get a lot is what do I do if my child discloses to me? What do I do if my teammate discloses abuse? And so I think having some language ready to go for these situations can be really helpful. So if Madison were to tell me, hey, Kat, I just experienced this and I'm not really sure what I want to do. I'm never going to tell her what to do. I'm going to validate her experience. I'm going to say, I'm so sorry that happened. It wasn't your fault. I'm not going to go out and touch her right away. I'm going to ask her permission. She might be sensitive in that moment and say, would you like a hug? And put her back in a position of power. And I can offer her resources and tell her about different things available so that she can get the help she needs when she's ready to report and disclose. That's how I can be the best friend to her or the best parent is believe her and just be with her in this difficult time.
when you're talking about that, it's something I think is really important to remember is that every single one of us in sports plays a role in making sure that we're all safe and that we're preventing abuse from happening. Every athlete, every parent, every coach, everyone in these sporting communities plays a role in making sure that our communities are safe and our sports are safe. And if we care about the future of our sports, we have to take an active role in making sure that we're preventing abuse from happening to the next generation of athletes, to our teammates, to our friends. So taking the pledge on our website is a great way to get involved with that. And reading those card diagrams is a great way to have those actionable tools to be able to make sure we are being the best teammates and the best members of our communities possible. So we really encourage you to get involved. There needs to be a new culture and a new normal within every sport to make sure that we are protecting athletes ahead of time.
Thanks for bringing that up, Madison. You're totally right that we all have a role to play, because even if we might not be survivors ourselves, we play a big role in how we respond to someone else who has disclosed abuse, or our role in prevention about establishing a code of conduct and following that. Because when we don't do such things, we're giving passive permission for this negative behavior to continue and enabling that culture of blaming and shaming and unhealthy dynamics. And so I think in this moment, if you do have a question about some gray area or nuance in your space, there is the helpline that you can call for on-the-spot resource.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kat, for bringing up the helpline. I think it's really important that we are able to continuously provide those tangible resources, those tangible next steps for our athletes, our parents, our coaches. So like you were saying, the Courage First Athlete Helpline is a great place to start. It's a free, anonymous resource for anybody. So a parent, a coach, an athlete in any sport. It's a great starting point in terms of if you have questions or if something's happening to a teammate or someone in your athletic environment, or if something's happened to you and you're not sure where to go in terms of reporting or legal support. That being said, if you are somebody in crisis, then please, reach out, call 911. We also have a page of crisis resources on our website to give you a starting point. Beyond the Courage First Athlete Helpline, we also have other actionable, easy to understand and digest resources. So, we encourage people to look at our blog, which has all types of resources tailored to different audiences. So whether you're a coach, a parent, athlete, it goes back to having these conversations in a million different ways to make it easy to understand and easy to implement on your team and your sport at your level. And so one step, even beyond that, on our website too, is taking a look at our PSAs, taking a look at our sport specific pages. So whether you're a soccer player or a hockey player, an equestrian, a volleyball player, we have resources available to you because again, this is an issue in all sports, and it's really important that we are cognizant of how to best serve these specific communities.
Well, thank you so much for diving into these topics today and breaking them down further. If you want to learn more, please go check out WeRideTogether.today.